I have to be honest, a lot of these lessons didn't come from that. It just came from experiences of being in the community. Um, so with that said, like again, for me, the clarity of purpose that you see on the slide right now, the understanding embedded in these two sentences is really a product of experiences that took time. Here I am now talking to you all at age 45, and I'm able to share it and pass it on. But truthfully, it didn't come after completing, as I said, formal education. It really came out of having human experiences. So, I live these principles in my life every day. And what leads me, and it was interesting, we were talking a little bit about kind of, me taking on this chair role in the face of the pandemic. For me, it's really been through a lens of gratitude and giving that I've been able to fuel this approach that I take. But I have to be honest, it's not how my story began. So the next few slides are really to set the foundation and give you a sense of my franchise, my practice, and my approach. So hopefully you'll bear with me here a little bit. So again, in an academic context, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. He talks about finding your why. The difference between happiness and fulfillment is the difference between liking something and loving something. Happiness comes from what we do. Fulfillment comes from why we do it. Easy for me to say this now. It was something that took me time to understand what was my passions, what was my journey. But you'll see underneath here, the early genesis of my approach really started outside a 7-Eleven at Ellis and Sherbrooke. And I share that so that my parents were early immigrants when they came to Canada in the early 70s. And you wonder why the 7-Eleven on Ellis? Well, the Hindu temple is on Ellis. So as new Canadians, it was common that my parents would spend all their waking hours, all their free time at the temple. And all of us young kids didn't necessarily see the value being there. So the first instincts were to start loitering in the neighborhood, hanging around in all the places I shouldn't be. And I found myself at age 9 selling individual cigarettes at the 7-Eleven on Ellis. And it was one of those things where I'd be lying to you if it wasn't fun. It was a way to make pocket money. But ultimately, it was a way to pass the time. But that's where I started to kind of observe and learn about human experiences and just around humans interact. So I wanted to kind of start setting the foundation a little bit about kind of when I take you to the end point of what motivates me. When I was growing up, to be completely honest with you, as I shared, the word networking wasn't necessarily something that I liked. But when I had to unpack it for purposes of this conversation, I have to be honest in that networking didn't feel inclusive. It felt like it was only available to individuals with privilege. As a racialized individual growing up in this community, I consistently felt barriers that systematically limited my ability to get access to the opportunities, to get in front of key individuals, to maybe help, frame my lines of thought. So I have to be truthful when I say my approach really was born out of struggle. It was a product of my parents didn't have a membership at the local golf and country club. My family didn't have a cabin at Lake of the Woods. My parents didn't go to the local curling place and socialize with other leaders. And even as I was getting into Asper, business, wine, and cheeses events just truthfully just didn't connect with me. It wasn't something that I was familiar with. It wasn't something that I was necessarily taught on how to navigate through. So my ability to connect with individuals and start to be able to kind of read situations, read scenarios is really a product of I was always on the outside. So I had no choice but to kind of observe and see how kind of individuals moved in certain situations or how they moved in certain networking events. I still remember the first time I went to the Manitoba Club for the first time. I felt like a kid in a candy store, and that this was not a space that someone like me with my background would ever be able to be in. So I consistently try to absorb and learn as much as I can from around people that were around me. So I bring this up because the way that I kind of led myself and really found some kind of consistency was I had to embrace my North Star. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about who I am. And clearly you can tell I'm South Asian. But what my approach is now, and it has been probably for the last 10 years or so, is encapsulated perfectly in the word seva. Seva is a Sanskrit word basically that talks about putting out positivity and good into the world. I'm sure you've all heard about karma and dharma. So those are aspects that now here who I am today, that's what continues to continues to fuel me as I go forward. So again, like as I grew into my own identity, my thought process and viewpoints also matured. The clarity I needed and the approach I take to connecting is rooted in the word seva. Each time I connect with a new person and get to extend some type of support to a young person in particular in a community, I'm filling my spiritual bucket. Seva is that for me. Building that type of equity in relationships never gets tiring. And it perfectly aligns with my North Star. So here we are in the face of a pandemic. I'm sure we're all zoomed out. We're constantly connecting and staying connected with key individuals in the marketplace. But by having this as my reference point and my perspective, it continues to fuel who I am, and I never feel like my spiritual bucket's empty. So I wanted to kind of give you guys a sense of what drives me, but a lot of it is kind of who I am at my spiritual core. So as I started to progress, like a lot of it was when I would look at my own experiences and my own journey and my own travels, and I look at the world I'm in right now, and I look at the struggles that our business community is going through. I look at how our frontline workers are working. Here we are on the anniversary of George Floyd, and I look at all the amazing things we're doing in the social space. A lot of who I am, again, is a product of empathy. So again, what I did was I cultivated it. I had no choice. When you're an individual that came from a challenged background, you encountered struggles, you had to find a way to define what you were doing. So for me, it became one of those things where I would put out good into the world, not because I wanted something in return, because I genuinely wanted to see other people rise. It's interesting, there's a student here on this call right now that was one of my students when I was in junior achievement when he was in high school. And to see him manifest his potential to today, I'd be lying to you if it doesn't even bring on tears for me, because you could see that when he was a young person back then, he was going to be a great individual. So for me, it's truly a privilege to be able to give to our community, give to our young people and support them. I'm sure many of you have read Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, and he has a breakdown of kind of 3 different archetypes, mavens, connectors, and salespeople. And that's where I didn't like the word networking. I really like the idea of connecting. It's kind of who I was. It's someone that I was from the moment I was at 7-Eleven at 9 years old selling cigarettes. I was always that young person that could connect you with something. I was Kijiji, I think, before it was Kijiji. But, it was one of those things where that's really what continued to fuel me and excite me. But again, here, just taking this right directly from Malcolm Gladwell, like you see yourself as a hub, and it's just the way that you kind of want to be. You see yourself as an opportunity to kind of be a Rolodex for people. And for that, I've always valued and loved connecting people to other people. Because I sit there going, it's not always about me that has to necessarily lead the conversation. Others can do that, but again, it's one of those things where, similar like Google reviews, I put myself in a spot where if I say, hey, I want you to go talk to Scott because he's going to do great things for you. And I think you two together are going to be magnifying all the great things that you do. That is what excites me. And that's where, like, in the dynamic where I am, where I'm often helping young people, whether it be at Asper, through LinkedIn, they'll often kind of come back to me and they'll often say, like, hey, Raj, like, how can I ever repay you back for all the help that you've done? What can I do for you? And I think I put them on their heels often when I tell them, I need nothing. All I ask is you pay it forward. Make yourself available to the next person that may need help. Be accessible. Be there to kind of, answer a text that late at night from a business owner that's feeling stressed about what they're going on in their current ecosystem, what their current environment is. So empathy is one of the core pillars of who I am. But I thought it was important that I share with you kind of what led that, how I got that till today. So, I'm sure many of you already are connectors in your own respective space. You probably If you don't know it, you probably are, and your friends and family would probably say that. Again, for me, it's, you're constantly referring to people to the right experts, or, you love connecting and talking with people just for the sake of doing it. I don't have a reason or an agenda. I just love it to do it. I often find myself in a spot where people are saying, hey, wow, Raj, you know everyone. Well, I got to qualify that. I'm raised in this community. I went to elementary school, junior high, high school, undergrad. I'm privileged in the role that I'm in now, where at the age I'm at, where I have individuals in different areas where I know what they're up to, I know what they're doing. So I love the opportunity of magnifying what they're doing. There's an amazing person here in Winnipeg. Her name is Carrie Twig, and Carrie's this phenomenal career consultant, but she's being very purposeful, in particular, helping people find their voices. And what I love is she's always asking people to magnify your story. And that's what I've always loved about being a connector. I love the idea that it's about the stories people tell, and that's really what I galvanize myself to. That's what I connect to. And I often will say that, I'm a story collector. I love knowing the good and the bad of what people have navigated through. So again, on the backdrop of a pandemic, on the backdrop of everything that we're having to do virtual now, having information in this age of the internet, everyone can get that. We all can go, hey, Alexa, hey, Siri, and get an answer to something. But what I think is more important than today is how we all synthesize that information, and how we interpret it, and how we share that, but beyond that, it's being generous with that sharing, being open to saying, look, I want to build you up, and I want to share my insights with you. It's up to you on how you want to take it. But those are the areas that really, really excite me and guide me when it comes to when I'm connecting with the individuals. For me, it's about building goodwill. And, that goodwill will manifest itself maybe in my life. It may manifest itself in my son's life, for my wife. But it's one of those things where I'm consistently not measuring ROI. I'm not looking at a return on my investment. I may invest 2 hours in a young person in the evening that's having struggles at university or grad school or whatever the case is, but I'm not necessarily looking for something tangible that I can measure. So again, it's always sometimes about the spiritual credit that you get out of it. So I really wanted to kind of share that with you all. For me in particular, it took some time for me to kind of understand this ideology, even for myself, and understand what drives me, but really it comes down to community building. And it is, like, as I've noted up here, it's an end in itself. I'm not doing things to somehow build my brand, or I'm not doing things because it's going to deliver some type of profit or monetary benefit. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do and what we all need to kind of build our community. And I think it takes time, but I think we all need to appreciate we have this amazing level of power in our connections. I apologize. Someone's ringing my doorbell right now. It might be Amazon, but and now my dog's going to come. But again, it's one of those things where I would say, look, for everyone, use your power, use the opportunity that you have to kind of leverage someone else up. Allow them to stand on your shoulders to raise opportunity for them. And that's where I kind of said, my teenage sons will often use the word clout. I'm not clout chasing. What I'm doing is I'm not doing this for popularity, but I'm doing this to improve our community, make our city better, and in turn, hopefully adding to the foundation of other people that are kind of in our community that are going through challenges. This next slide is interesting. I was debating if I want to put this in here or not. So this gentleman is actually my father. And this is my 75. Give me just a second and it's only go away. Sorry, guys. He's going to keep ringing the doorbell. So again, this is my father. And the reason why I bring this up is a lot of my lessons, to be honest, were from this gentleman. My dad emigrated to Canada in the early 70s, worked 2 jobs every day. My dad worked 20 years in retail sales. And for those that were raised in Winnipeg or grew up in Winnipeg, you might recognize this guy from Eaton's downtown Winnipeg. My dad worked for 10 years at Eaton's in the suit shop. And then my dad worked for 10 years at Tip Top in St. Vital Mall. What my dad was a giant in is making people feel special in the moment they were with him. And it was one of those things where my dad would always finish a sale, and I'll share a little bit about my story that I started as a stock boy at Tip Top, learning from people around my dad and other individuals that were just amazing. But my dad would always leave the end, the dynamic where someone would come into his shop and then he'd help them out, and then he'd walk around the counter and hand them their bag. That was early back then. You didn't do that. That just wasn't something people did. But my dad would have this line saying, I hope I added some positivity to your day. Looking forward to seeing you again. My dad consistently in those moments, and he still does that today. He's now retired in Texas. He retired as a pharmacy technician in Houston, Texas. At his retirement, there was 600 people. And what's interesting is my dad's name, in its pure translation, my dad's name is Hasmukh, but it translates perfectly to smiling face. My dad's nickname at CVS was Happy. He was always known as Happy Patel. So when Happy Patel retired, the CVS shop had to rent a hall to celebrate my dad's retirement. But my dad, in these moments, whether it was Hurricane Katrina and people were coming in from New Orleans feeling distraught and were dealing with mental health struggles and challenges, my dad made sure he connected with people in a genuine and passionate way. He would find diverse and unique ways to connect with people beyond the regular. And it was one of those things where even today, as I noted here, my dad doesn't like the word networking. He likes socializing. But for him, it was a collecting friendships. So for him, it was about he would lead with care and compassion and generosity, and he would invest that equity in every relationship. So in those connections, they always knew my dad was coming from a great, pure place. And I try to emulate that. I hope I can aspire to the heights that he is one day. I hope when I'm 75, someone's like, yeah, that Raj guy was a good kid. But for me, it's one of those things where I continue to look around people in my own network and try to emulate these amazing best practices. But it started with my dad. And as I noted, I started as a stock boy at St. Mattel Mall at Tip Top. And my dad would tell me that, as I'm stacking the shelf or I'm, reshuffling something, someone would come there and my dad's like, you say hello to them, see how they're doing, welcome them to your store. If they're in your store, it's comparable to them being in your living room. And that, in early days, that kind of was like, Dad, what are you talking about? Like, we're in St. Mattel Mall. Like, this isn't my living room, Dad. But my dad took a mindset that he wanted to give you an experience that you'll remember. And even if you're just buying a pair of socks, or even if you're just buying a tie, my dad made it a memorable one. And, and then I took on my own store. I managed Athletes World in St. Mattel Mall. And even when I would training young people, the comment is the moment someone would walk into your shop, you had 15 seconds to engage them. Well, hey, you know what? If I'm just going to engage, let's say Riel, and I'd be like, hey, if you need anything, I'm just in the back, come and get me. As opposed to, hey, I love your jacket. That is a really nice jacket. Where'd you get that from? Or, hey, is it still raining outside, man? I was hoping to, be able to get outside. Like, you're trying to connect with people in a more genuine kind of way. But I learned that by being around other great connectors. And I took the mindset that I'm going to be a student. I'm going to learn from them. So I'm not going to tell my dad that I put a slide in here because it's just going to make his head blow up. But just in case you ever bump into my dad, he's a great guy. The piece that my dad and others around me that continue to instill in me is the idea of generosity. And that's why I kind of share the idea of habitual generosity. I talked earlier about karma. Karma is this thing that you can't measure, but gosh darn it, when your life is going well, the universe is shining on you. And that's what I continue to chase. I continue to chase and put myself in a position where when I'm connecting with people, I'm always looking for an opportunity to rise them, to invest in them, but also hopefully let them know that if there's anyone else they know that are going through challenging times or struggles of any type, don't hesitate to reach out to me. So the reason I bring that up is, and that's kind of what leads me to the world that we're in today when it comes to digital and virtual. LinkedIn went live in 2002, and Many of you are on it. Many of you are already curating your presence on it. It's got a huge user base. Influencers like Gary Vaynerchuk would tell you that at the proportion that Instagram's users are falling off, they are growing into the space of LinkedIn. And we're seeing that. I'm noticing it as well. It's becoming much more of a busy place. So it's one of those things where I'm leveraging that platform in particular to continue to lead forward, to continue to bring positivity, to continue to invest equity in our community. In particular, my natural passions are young people, new Canadians. I'm a big proponent for women, inclusivity, and diversity. So it's one of those things where that's where I continue to yield my passions and continue to invest. But I talk a little bit about the 5-minute favor. The idea that you're going to reach out to someone on LinkedIn, sharing a post that they might have done, building a small favor by you might introduce them to someone. But again, a lot of it is you're trying to build your social capital. And again, it's not a tangible thing. But it's one of those things where you'll know when you've hit a spot where people are like, okay, you know what? Nicole referred you to me, so I co-signed on you indirectly. If you're a friend of Nicole's, you're a friend of mine. And that's the tone I take, and that's the approach I take. So it's one of those things where I often say in our small community of Winnipeg, in order for us to get through this, pandemic, to get through what we need to do to reboot this economy, we're all going to need to double down. We're all going to need to be open to introducing individuals into our networks that may not have been there before. And I would challenge everybody to say, well, look, now's the time that we need to do that. I often tell the young people on my team that we've lost our downtown right now, meaning normally Winnipeg was all about the concourse. If you're working downtown, you had the concourses. I would bump into a ton of people. I'd see Geo, I'd see other people. I don't have that. So I now tell my team regularly, the virtual downtown is LinkedIn. So when you see great things happening in our community, participate in it, share in it. When we see the Richardson family acquire Bison Transport, we all should be celebrating that. We should all be championing, going, this is awesome, seeing a Manitoba family retain a Manitoba company. Those are the things that we need to continue to celebrate. So when you see great things happening in our community, especially in the face of all the things we're going through, share it, talk about it, brag about all the great things that are going on in Winnipeg, because there is an amazing amount of positive momentum. I just think if we all continue to be purposeful and magnified, I think the city is going to be amazing on the other end of this pandemic. So one of the pieces that I thought I'd bring up specific to LinkedIn is there's an option within LinkedIn that shows if you're going to be available to people. So meaning, and so on the left-hand side, you'll see people can contact me. I've actually approached LinkedIn to say, I want to select all of them or more than 3. But for whatever reason, right now, the LinkedIn platform only allows you to select 3. But by doing this, you're putting a marker in your front yard saying, I'm open for business. You can approach me, you can reach out to me, you can ask a question, but this is important. And I tell this to people often that it shows that you're growth minded. It shows that you're willing to mentor a young person. It shows that you're willing to grab a coffee potentially with someone to answer some questions. So when they reach out to you, like Carrie would teach somebody to say, hey, reach out to somebody and learn their career story, you're going to be open to doing that. So that's why I say make yourself available to your network, share your voice, share your insights and experiences freely. Office hours, I'm inherently a student. I kind of mean this tongue in cheek, don't have office hours. Like my comment is now is that like when I look at the disruption I'm going through, my sons don't have their extracurricular activities. I don't have chamber events in the evening. I don't have bank events. So I'm often telling people I'm available. If you want to do a quick Zoom call in the evening or even if on the weekend, I'm open to that. So that has been something that I've been doing a lot of. I've been doing a lot of evening calls, but I mean this wholeheartedly. I'm okay with that. It's a 20-minute touch point, 30 minutes, maybe an hour at the most, but it's fueling someone else's life for the better. A lot of people are navigating through their jobs, their disruption. Me showing and being available when they're available, again, I think is a great example of, in order for us to kind of continue to grow and develop our community, we're all going to need to disrupt traditional ideologies around, you know what, I only have office hours between 11 and 12 or 11 and 1. And I had those professors and I never built relationships with them because I could never get to their office. So I would ask all of you to maybe consider, opening yourself up to the idea of being available to make, quick, evening phone call, quick little WebEx. The other thing I kind of prescribe to is, when I get DMs or direct messages, I commit internally that I'm going to respond to them in one business day. And some of my motivation for doing that is I want to show the other party that nervously reached out to me to ask a question or asked if, they got over the hump of wanting to say, hey, Raj, can I get a coffee with you? Or can I get a call with you? If I'm going to drag them on for a week, let's be honest, it's not going to make them feel really good. So I commit that I'm going to respond back to them in one business day. Does it add to my plate? For sure. But again, it's something that fills my spiritual bucket. So I would ask all of you that, it might be something as you build your cadence in your regular, when you're looking at LinkedIn, how are you posting? How are you curating your content? If you start kind of building it into your regular routines, that you're going to start, responding back quick. And I get messages from across the country, in particular, new Canadians that are struggling to get their first new job. I throw them off. My wife thinks it's kind of funny. I do too. I'll be like, what's your number? And they're like, I can see them kind of leaning back going, what? Like, you want my number? Yeah, I'm phoning you. So I do a lot of that, but a lot of it is I'm trying to leverage the fact I have capacity right now. And it's something I intrinsically enjoy. So it's one of those things where these things within LinkedIn, I think, are a great tool to kind of help magnify all the great things that you're kind of trying to do with your personal brand. So, again, we talk a little bit about social currency, and in particular, I'll be specific around LinkedIn. Again, technology's, been this amazing tool, but I think the pandemic has forced us to double down and really sit back and be self-aware on how am I leveraging this tool. So for me, I'm actually building stronger relationships by leveraging technology and going through LinkedIn and messaging people. And as I noted here, I find myself doubling down. But again, my motivations are I continue to make professional and personal connections with people through a lens of care and compassion. We are all collectively going through this shared experience. So the idea that I'm going to reach out to somebody and talk business, that's probably actually the last thing I'm doing. I'm asking people about how are they holding up? How's their mental health? How's their mental fitness? How's their family holding up? How are their kids doing in the face of all the disruption? And the business piece ends up being the last maybe 20% of the discussion. But I built a foundation with them that they know I care, and I really do, because it is one of those things where I look at what our community is going through. It's not easy. So in those moments, I try to take the extra I feel in my spiritual bucket to invest it in somebody else. I'll say this as a male, being vulnerable is not something my gender was taught, but I'm choosing to be more vulnerable than I ever was. And some of that is a byproduct of being a first generation immigrant, now being a father. So I don't shy away from sharing with people my struggles and the challenges I'm going through. And when I see people post about mental health, or I see people post about a moment where they've tripped and fallen and scraped their knee, I comment. I comment on those posts. I talk about the importance of mental health and mental fitness. I think it's very important that we all do that, but it starts with ourselves. And again, coming from the perspective of a male, I didn't mentor around other men that would talk about the moments where they were failing as a father or as a husband or as a manager. So I take it upon myself to be much more vulnerable than my mentors were, as a way to let young people know in particular, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have moments where you're unsure of yourself, but build a community around you that is going to help you grow and help lift you up in those really tough moments. The other piece I talk about is asking deeper that comment should be asking deeper questions and be genuinely curious. So again, when I'm asking people, I'll ask them how are they doing? How's their family? I'll remember that. But I'm purposely doing it through LinkedIn, and I'll qualify the reason why. As I'm getting older, my memory's going. And what I love about LinkedIn is I get a picture of the person. I get a continuity of the message. So in the moment, let's be honest, we all have our phones with us at all times. So if I bump into someone in line at Costco, or I bump into someone as I'm pumping my gas, I'm trying to often jog my memory where I know them. So what I love about, instead of having it in a traditional email, I keep that organic conversation going within LinkedIn. So I can remember the things we talked about. Again, I added here, send personalized intro emails. I get a lot of people connecting with me through LinkedIn, blindly connect, and that's it. I don't get a follow-up note or anything like that. I've taken the approach where I will send them a follow-up email. And even if it's quick and short, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. I hope things are great in your life, or even your side of the world, because I'm getting connected with people from around the world. That's what's beautiful about LinkedIn. But what I love is that I'm showing them I value what you did with me, and I'm hoping that we might be able to foster a bigger and greater dialogue here. So that's something that I do a lot of. It's interesting. I've started doing this recently, and I have to give credit to some Asper grads that did this with me first. They were sending me video and audio messages instead of the traditional email or a direct message. I would get a quick little video, and they would attach it and send it through LinkedIn. And I was so impressed. It caught my attention. It had a more genuine feel to it. So that's something I've started doing. I've started quick little audio message, quick little video message that takes 2 seconds. I've been doing that, and the feedback I'm getting from the people I'm trying to maintain connections with or grow connections with are telling me they really value it. One of the things, again, that I've been doing, and again, I got to give a lot of credit to a bunch of business students from across the country. They'll pique my interest, or they'll grab my attention because they'll send an e-gift certificate for Starbucks. They'll send me a $5 e-gift certificate saying, hey, Raj, you don't know me. I see what you're doing. I would love to talk to you about your career trajectory. And as an old timer, I get a little bit embarrassed. Like, okay, dude, you're not buying me coffee. I'm going to buy you coffee now because you've caught my interest. So I do a lot of that kind of stuff when it comes to virtual coffees. But I've been so impressed with the way young people are stimulating even someone like me through video, audio, text, and then even these e-gift certificates. The other thing that's really, really interesting embedded inside LinkedIn is the extending endorsements. That is a very, very powerful tool. And I think, again, it's similar to Google reviews. We are all social creatures. If we see that someone that we respect or value has been endorsed by someone that again, that adds greater credibility. So I would ask everybody to start, if you haven't already, to start extending endorsements, because I think it's a very powerful way to indirectly co-sign on somebody virtually to say, you know what, I think this person has great skills in the financial domain, or in the not-for-profit space, man, you can't beat this person. So those are things that I've been actively doing as well. The final thing I'm going to talk about is actively connecting with folks that may not look like you, sound like you, or talk like you. It's one of those things where I think inherently we all are curating networks around people that are like-minded like us, but often that may look like us. I would ask everybody that we look at things now through the disruption around us, the social disruption around us, where we're actively looking to connect with individuals that may be outside of our natural domain. And I think that's really important now more than ever. So, and we all know this, that we have a diverse network. You're exposed to new diverse lines of thought, and you get more diverse and better outcomes. So in particular, as someone that values tremendously having people within my network that are a true cross-section of all of Canada, I love it. I love getting exposed to different ideologies that I may not have seen before. A friend of mine, actually, he'd posted something about neurodiversity. It was a concept I wasn't necessarily aware of. I could talk around diversity, but I don't think I ever understood that. And a friend of mine who's a partner at Ernst & Young posted about it. And I love that I got to stumble across that piece, and I got to read that thought leadership piece. So that was something that really excited me tremendously. So I would ask everybody to kind of get a bit more bolder, try to reach out to individuals that are outside of your natural space that may not necessarily look like you. This next kind of final slide is one that I'll be honest with you, I was debating on putting up just because I don't want to kind of monetize all the other stuff I just shared with you. But I'm purposely bringing this up to say Raj is a corporate banker, and the snippets of posts I'm sharing here with you, except for one, have to do with banking. I'm not selling a product. I'm not trying to push RBC because, in my opinion, respectfully, that would be too easy. I'm talking about our community. I'm talking about my mother. I'm talking about my wife. I'm talking about Truth and Reconciliation. I'm talking about, as an alumni, what Asper's doing. 15,000 views, 17,000 views, 7,000 views. Like, the algorithm for LinkedIn has a natural propensity towards positivity and optimism. It's built that way. So I would say if Raj was going to post about, hey, did you get your RSPs in? Contact your local branch. Like, that's not me. That's not who I am. But I don't think my audience would connect with that. So I was hesitant to put this up, but I know it's kind of one of those things where you're like, hey, Raj, we heard your whole story. We heard what your key pillars are, but is it going to result in greater traffic for me? And how am I going to build my brand? This is my screen that hopefully validates the approach you take will yield results, but you have to be purposeful. But again, I echo, I'm not talking about banking. I'm not trying to push a product. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm repping my city. I'm talking about what's going on in my community. I'm sharing things I'm proud about. And that is how I've been able to kind of position myself as a connector. Some would say I'm an influencer. I don't necessarily think that, but ultimately that's what continues to fuel and excite me. So I think I've gone a little bit over time, Real, if I'm not mistaken, but I was hoping to just open it up. If anyone had any questions, comments, I would just, I know we're going to be doing a breakout here, Riel, but I just thought maybe if I could take like a couple minutes just to have the entire group together, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
So, hey, I'll open up to all of you if you guys have any questions for me. If not, we can just go out into the breakout rooms.
Raj, I'd have a question for you. Your morning routine. Are you one of the 5 o'clock in the morning routine guy? Do you have, a certain routine that you do that you feel that if you don't do it, your day is a little off?
Yeah, I'm going to give you, my answer is going to be pre-COVID and kind of current. Pre-COVID, my routines were up at 5, at the gym for 5:30, at my desk downtown at 220 Portage for around 7:30. COVID, no, I don't think I've done 5 in a long time. And a lot of that is just, I'm constantly dealing with disruption, but I'm okay with that. I've embraced the idea that, I've lost some elements of my discipline around my morning routine, but I'm still present in my household. I'm still there to be with my sons. I'm still there to send them off with positivity as they start their day. I have to be honest with you, Nicole, that wasn't something I ever did. My oldest is 14, my youngest is 11. I'm almost embarrassed to say that until COVID, I don't know what their morning routines were. I had no idea. I was gone. My wife handled that. So if anything, I've doubled down on my family life routines. Again, that fills my spiritual bucket. Dad's more present. So I do a lot of that. My morning routines, there's still some elements of structure. My hobbies are lifting weights and martial arts. I do that now in the evenings with my sons. So I used to tell myself that getting up really early in the morning was a great way to get the dopamine going in my brain, get the endorphins rolling to fuel me for the rest of the day. I'm still missing some of that, to be completely honest. I have moments where I miss my old routine, but yeah, no, great question. Awesome. Well, hey, if there are any more questions, I know Riel's going to facilitate us breaking out into a session. I'm going to keep it light, but 3 questions for all of you. Again, just to stimulate some dialogue, if that's all right. But again, sometimes it's hard asking strangers some pretty deep questions. So, the first question is, with all the disruption and uncertainty around us, how are you staying motivated and fueled? Our second question, how are you curating and magnifying you and your brand to your network? And how is a platform like LinkedIn a tool for you? And then the third question, what has worked for you in building both a personal and professional community around you, specifically around this time of COVID? So that's it, guys. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us, or joining me and Riel and the chamber. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come talk to you guys. I hope you guys got some value out of it. And yeah, looking forward to the breakout sessions.